Okay, so this study is a study by Elder Jeff. He developed it back in the 90s when he was first studying the triple application of prophecy. He had the three Elijahs, the three woes, the three Babylons, and the three Romes. So this study is maybe 25, 30 years old. So he would compare pagan Rome with papal Rome. And modern Rome. I'm putting King of the North there because now we know modern Rome has nothing to do with end time prophecy. So we call it the King of the North. So pagan Rome, I think it's Daniel 8:9. Maybe someone can check, but it tells you how pagan Rome takes over the world. It says it takes the east, which is Syria, which is 64 BC. Then in 63 BC, it says it takes the Pleasant Land, which is Israel or the Glorious Land. And the last territory it takes in 31 BC is the south, which is Egypt, at the Battle of Actium. So it takes down 3 territories before, in the words of Elder Jeff, it rules the world supremely. For a time, which is 360 years. Which takes you to 330 AD, when pagan Rome ends. And that's when papal Rome begins to rise. Starts to pluck up the 3 horns. I think it's Daniel 7:8. Can someone check that for me? And the 3 horns are, I don't remember the dates. $493. The Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. $534. And you know this one, $538. So when Papal Rome has taken down 3 territories, it rules the world supremely for a time dividing of time. (1,260 years). When in 1798, Papal Rome comes to its end. So you take the characteristics of the first and the characteristics of the second to find out the characteristics of the third. (1989), the Soviet Union is the first territory to be taken down. In 2024, the Glorious Land is the second territory. And at Daniel 12:1, it's Russia, the king of the south. Then it starts to rule here, Daniel 12:1, until it comes to its end at the second advent. Okay. So that's Elder Jeff's study. Any questions on that?
So 1989 USSR, that's Daniel 11:40. Then Glorious Land, that's Daniel 11:41. And USSR would be king of the south. Glorious Land is Glorious Land. And then what is Russia in Daniel 11? Because for me it would make sense if we say it's Egypt. But yeah.
Okay, you spotted it straight away. That's the discrepancy with this study. Sorry, in English, you said, this is the USSR, king of the south. This is the glory. This is the Glorious Land. And then this is Russia, king of the south again. In Daniel 11:43, is it? It says Egypt, but that means the world, not Russia. And as I'm saying here, Egypt is Russia, which is even more confusing because Russia's already been dealt with here. So Daniel 11:40 to 45 is still correct. This is still verse 40, king of the south. 41 is still the Glorious Land, America. And I think it's 43. Maybe someone can check that for me as well. That is still the world. Verse 40 is the US's. And then, but this gives us a different story. So we're finding out extra information. Okay. The way Elder Parminder explained it is that this top line tells the story of the king of the south versus the king of the north. This is pagan Rome taking territory from Greece. And at this, by the time you get to 64 BC, Greece is only the king of the south. Okay. Greece was split into north and south. And pagan Rome took the northern part of Greece about 100 years earlier. It was the Battle of Pydna. I think it was 168 BC. And that's when pagan Rome conquered the northern part of Greece and cut off Alexander the Great's line of kings. Lineage. So after 168, pagan Rome is the king of the north, and Greece is the king of the south. This is how pagan Rome takes 3 territories from the king of the south to rule the world supremely. So this south, can you hear the noise? Sorry, it's noisy. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So this south, or Egypt here, represents the king of the south.
Yes, but it also represents the rest of the world, because that was the only part of the world left that
Yes.
that wasn't conquered. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's still fine. That's correct. Yes. Don't forget, Daniel 12:1 is the worldwide summary. So you can only use the 1888 model to explain. Russia is also the last country to be taken down out of the whole world, so that's fine. Sorry, for the English, you said Egypt was the last country to be taken down out of the whole world. So when you say that, it makes more sense to me now, actually. Verse 43 is the world. And this waymark tells you that Russia is the last country in the world. Does that make sense? Am I right?
The way I always understood it is that when Russia is defeated, or when King of the South is defeated, sorry, not repeated, defeated, then there's no one to hinder the King of the North. I translate.
So for the English, you're saying you always understood Russia is the last country to go down out of the entire world. So when Russia goes down, that means the King of the North conquers the world. And I agree with that. And I think that's what this is showing. if you only look at Daniel 43, I think, it just says the world. It doesn't tell you which one is the last country in the world. But this model is the model which tells you which country it is.
Aha. Now it connected for me too. Ah. Okay.
Okay. So basically that answers it, but let me just finish anyway. And then in Papal Rome, you see 3 territories taken down before the King of the North rules the world supremely. And this one, I don't know, I'm guessing really. I think this one is just showing that there's a consecutive order. That may not be true, don't worry if you don't understand. Because this one is showing, as you already said, King of the South and King of the South again. It's not consecutive. Okay, and then you've got our model here. And then all I would do, so that's just pure Elder Jeff. And then what Elder Terry added, Elder Jeff said that this was the complete and final death of the King of the South. And then Elder Tess comes along and says, no, Elder Jeff, this history is going to repeat. Panium is the deadly wound, and Sunday law is the death. So this isn't the complete and final death of the King of the South. This is the complete and final death of the King of the South. Then Elder Terry says, let's compare and contrast to the King of the North. The election was an internal victory for the King of the North. So the King of the North enters into the glorious land. If the King of the North is America and the glorious land is America, then in the words of Elder Tess, it will be called civil war or revolution, counter-revolution, or war on the Western Front, if it was the World Wars. So internal victory is nothing new. It's a good, solid doctrine.
Sorry, you said internal victory.
Yeah, internal, the concept of an internal defeat or victory is a good thing. In 2019, Elder Parminder taught that back here, the King of the North, that back here, the King of the South killed itself. I don't know if you remember, but he said the king of the north gives a sword to the king of the south. And says, hey, king of the south, why don't you kill yourself? And the king of the south says, okay, then. And I think that's perestroika, glasnost, and those internal protests. Okay, so we're comparing and contrasting the king of the north to the king of the south.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
It 1989. Now, when you said it, it was actually internal. They killed themselves. It was an internal death. And we were, Eldertest was saying that this repeats from 2029 to 2024, what happened between 1989 to 1991. But it was an internal death. And also it was their internal, because it was Gorbachev who actually distilled, or who I don't know the word in English, who it wasn't an external force that defeated them. It was an internal death in 1999, and then it was themselves who distilled the empire. It was Gorbachev who decided to, I don't know the word in English, to to stop the empire from functioning. I don't know how to describe it in English. And we were expecting something external, but Eldertest told us it will repeat the history from 1989 to 1991, and that was internal thing. Do you know what I mean?
Kinda. So what's your conclusion? Are you saying internal should have been 2021?
No, I'm just saying I have a complete aha effect. Like we were expecting something that would never happen because it was always supposed to be internal.
Right. Okay,
because at 1989 it was internal, and 1991 it was internal too. It was no external force saying to Russia, you have to become not Soviet Union anymore. They were themselves who did it. So
okay.
Oh, I'm just totally, I really, so I have like like somebody opened my eyes now. Like we were expecting to have something to happen and it was never to be so. Eldertest studied it correctly. It's internal and internal death.
Okay. It's lucky you asked me to do this. I wasn't going to do it. Okay, so I'll repeat for the English and also so I understand.
Okay, when do I translate? I translate you or I translate now and then you repeat what you want?
I think I'll just repeat it in English because you've already done it in... Have you done it in Russian?
No, we'll do it in Slovak. Yeah, no, I didn't do it in Slovak. So how do you want me to do it?
I said that because it says Russian on my...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, I'll repeat it back and you translate.
Okay.
So Monica is saying she had an aha moment. That's as far as... No, hold on. Because the collapse of the Soviet Union, was purely internal. It was Gorbachev.
1991 was Gorbachev. Yeah.
1991 was Gorbachev. Okay, and that was his policies led to the internal collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's why we can expect an internal collapse or death here. And before today, you were wondering what is the collapse of the King of the South here. When you look at the news, it doesn't look like Putin has collapsed at all. But now that you understand it's internal, because this history repeats, now it all makes sense to you. Was that correct?
Yes, but I mean, the only thing that makes sense is the internal aspect, that both of those are internal fall. That's the thing that makes sense. But the democracy bit doesn't make sense to me, because the fall in 1989 was a win for democracy, but the fall in, let's say, from 2021 to 2024 is a defeat for democracy. So to me, it makes sense that both of them are an internal fall, but when we look at the democracy bit, in one of them, it's a win for democracy, and the other one is a loss of democracy. So that's the bit that doesn't fit. But what fits is that it's internal.
Can we translate? Okay, I'll repeat for the English. So I think you're saying 1989 was internal, and 1991 was also internal. Is that correct? We're saying this is internal. I've forgotten. What else was there?
Yes, so both of them are internal, but the first one is a win for democracy, and the second one is a loss for democracy. And both of them we call the defeat of the King of the South.
Right. This history was a win for democracy over the Soviet Union, but this is a loss for democracy in Russia, so it doesn't seem to match. So I'll tell you something else that doesn't match, and then try and offer an answer. If we carry on this study, so we're going to come back to this. I was going to say, compare and contrast King of the North to the King of the South. If that's an internal victory, that has to only be an internal death. So I'm going to take out complete and final death and just put in internal death. And then using the 1888 model, which you'll find in Last Day Events 135. The Sunday law starts in America national Sunday law, and then spreads around the world, country by country. And when the last country is defeated, which we now know is Russia, it means the whole world has Sunday laws in place. So we call this waymark the worldwide Sunday law, Daniel 12 month. The Sunday law is a test to the world. So when all the world has been tested, no more testing to do. And the word probation means testing. So no more testing, no more probation, close of probation. Okay, so that means that the King of the North wins in America internal. By the time you get to here, the King of the North has won against all the other countries. So that's outside America, external victory. Which means this must be an external death for the King of the South. External from Russia would be Ukraine. So this would be the end of the Ukraine war, marking Daniel 12 month. Does all that make sense, Sophie? So the end of the Ukraine war, and we'll put Navalny back in there now because I'm thinking. Okay. So that would ordinarily be the end of that study. And the point of the study is to say the end of the Ukraine war is Daniel 12. But going back to your point you made, you've got internal. So you're saying it should be internal in 2021 and internal Sunday law. Would that be the obvious conclusion? Okay. So what would be the internal defeat in 2021? Because I will ask a question. I know your history is correct about 1989. I'm not disputing that. But we also teach 1989 is the end of the Afghan war, which would be external. So you do, I think you do also have an external in 1989. Which would fit 2021. Because the external there would be the start of the Ukraine war. So you've got end of the war, start of the war. But I don't know what the internal will be. I never thought about it. And then here you have an internal, then external. I don't know what you do with this though, because we're back to our democracy discussion. And what does democracy mean to the King of the South? Democracy is a bad thing to the King of the South. Or is it? I don't know. Okay, that's all I can think of. Yeah. So now what we're doing is questioning your last thought on Navalny and the other board. When you said you can see how the death of Navalny is the internal. Using this model, the death of Navalny looks like a good thing for Putin. Okay, I better stop before we get confused. Any other thoughts?
Něco o demokracii v Rusku?
Ešte raz, Denny?
Chci říct něco o demokracii v Rusku?
I want to say something about the democracy in Russia.
Shall I repeat what you say for the English?
Maybe let me first translate her and then you can summarize what she said in English.
V Rusku nikdy pořádně demokracie nebyla, ale byly tam pokusy.
In Russia, there never was real democracy, but there were attempts to set up democracy.
Zvláště za Gorbačova,
especially when Gorbachev was there,
který se pokusil o perestrojku, přestavbu.
He attempted for perestroika, which would be a restructuralization of the country.
Ale jemu šlo spíše o to přestavět socialismu.
But what he actually really wanted was to rebuild socialism.
Každopádně to mělo prvky demokracie.
But there were some aspects of democracy in it.
Paradoxně se tato přestavba nepodařila.
And paradox is that this rebuilding didn't work out.
A vlastně znamenalo to rozpad Sovětského svazu.
And it led to the crumbling of Soviet Union.
Od té doby tam byly pokusy o demokracii, ale nikdy to nebyla demokracie ve smyslu západních zemí.
Since then, there were some attempts for democracy, but it never was a real democracy like there is in Western countries.
Od té doby, co přišel k vládě Putin, tak se demokracie postupně destruuje.
And since Putin is there, the democracy is bit by bit being distracted or destroyed.
Takže to by mohlo zapadnout do té vaší diskuze.
This could fall into your discussion. Prepáč, ešte sa ťa spýtam, ty teda hovoríš, že vlastne to, že sa nepodarilo Gorbačovi nastaviť demokraciu, to viedlo k rozpadu Sovietskeho zväzu?
V podstatě ano. V podstatě on tam nastartoval prvky demokracie ve smyslu, že by se ty státy nějakým způsobem osamostatnily, nebyly už pod Ruskem.
I asked her, so what you're saying is that Gorbachev tried to bring democracy, but it didn't work out and it led to the fallout of Soviet Union. And she says, yes, he brought some aspects that were aspects of democracy, that the states would be independent from Russia.
Ještě nějaká otázka?
Hej, mňa zaujalo to, že ty si prepojila to, že on chcel zaviesť demokraciu a to, že sa mu to nepodarilo, tak vlastne to viedlo k pádu Sovětského zväzu.
Ono to tam paradoxně něco nastartovalo, takovou tu odvahu těch ostatních zemí prostě se odpojit a nějaký ten pokus o demokracii si zavést těch jednotlivých zemí.
Ono sa v podstate Rusko sa rozpadlo a v podstate bola, za Jelcina by sa dalo povedať, že bola nejaká taká demokracia, akože nebola akože, hej, ale dalo by sa to nazvať demokraciou, kým neprišiel Putin, akože.
No áno.
Takže já jsem to chtěl jenom poznámkovat, že právě to, že se mu to podařilo, ne, že se mu to nepodařilo, že se mu to podařilo tomu Gorbačovovi, tak proto se to rozpadlo. Že se mu podařily ty prvky demokracie nastavit.
Okay. So they are in disagreement now. So one of them is saying that that Gorbachev brought the aspects of democracy, but because he failed to bring the real democracy, the Soviet Union fell apart. And the other person is saying, no, it was the other way around, because of the reason that he was successful with some of these democratic aspects, it brought the Soviet Union apart. So, okay.
I'm going to try to summarize. It's not going to be good for the English. So one person was saying that the Soviet Union collapsed under Gorbachev because perestroika, restructuring, he tried to restructure the Soviet Union under a socialist model with some democracy. Oh yeah, you don't need to translate. So, okay. And it collapsed because, what was the first person saying? It collapsed because
he didn't manage to do it.
He didn't manage the socialism?
He didn't manage to actually set up the democracy.
Okay, so the first person was saying Soviet Union collapsed because just said his name.
Já to přečtu.
Didn't set up the democracy properly, so the people rejected that model, protested, and it collapsed. But the second person was saying all of that history is true, except the people actually rejected the socialist part of that model, and that's why it collapsed. So, is the summary correct?
Yes, and also she was saying that there were attempts for democracy in Russia, but there never was real democracy.
There's been attempts for democracy in Russia, but it's never been real, never been, like Western countries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, you obviously know this history so much better than I do. I was actually kicked out of high school, so I don't remember it at all. But could it be possible that both people are correct? Because you know how history can view any event from different eyes. So anyway, we don't know.
What I'm thinking to do is to actually stop the language interpretation if they want to interact, so it's audible on the audio as well.
Sure, sure.
So we don't have to repeat. Let me. I don't know if I can do it now. I'll just try. Yeah. Okay, můžeš, Denny?
Já jsem chtěla říct, že ten Gorbačov se pokusil o tu perestrojku, o tu přestavbu,
Gorbachev tried to do perestroika. He tried to restructuralize,
ale on chtěl zachránit ten svůj systém, ten socialismus.
but he wanted to save socialism. He wanted to keep the system.
A on to chtěl zachránit v rámci celého Sovětského svazu.
He wanted to save it within the whole Soviet Union.
No a protože to přinášelo, ta přestavba přinášela prvky demokracie,
Because there were parts of democracy in this restructuralization,
to potom paradoxně vedlo k rozpadu toho Sovětského svazu.
the paradox was that it led to the fall of Soviet Union.
A ty ostatní satelitní státy si chtěli zavést demokracii.
And those satellite states, they wanted democracy.
No a ty pokusy tam byly až do Putina.
And the attempts for democracy were there until Putin came.
Takže Putin demokracii nechce.
Putin doesn't want democracy.
Ale myslím si, že jsou tam v Rusku jsou zastánci demokracie.
But in Russia there are people who are for democracy.
A myslím si, že jedním z nich byl i Navalny.
Navalny was one of them.
Ale on se snažil vlastně opravit tu svoji zemi, ve které už ta demokracie za Putina není možná.
And he tried to fix his country under Putin, and that's not possible to bring democracy under Putin.
Nicméně Navalny spustil jako docela velkou opozici proti Putinovi.
And he was able to start quite a big opposition against Putin.
A ta Julie Navalná v tom pokračuje.
And Yulia Navalna continues in this effort.
Je to ruská ekonomka a aktivistka.
She's activist and economist.
A ona po smrti svého manžela
After the death of her husband,
bojovala v takovém hnutí, které se jmenuje Poledne proti Putinovi.
she fought within a movement called I don't know how to
Poledne
translate
proti
this.
Putinovi.
I don't know how to translate. It's like a midday against Putin, something like that.
A ona vlastně za každou cenu chtěla pokračovat v těch myšlenkách svého manžela.
And she wanted to continue with what her husband was doing.
A podepsalo se pod to tisíce Rusů a dělali i demonstrace.
And thousands of Russians signed that and they were demonstrating.
A ona je vlastně tak silnou představitelkou v Rusku jako Cichaunovská v Bělorusku.
And she is as influential as Cichaunovská in Belarus.
Takže ten její vliv tam je zřejmý.
Her influence is obvious there.
Ale chápu, že někteří Rusy o tom nemají ani ponětí.
But I understand that some Russians have no idea about it.
Okay.
Um, okay.
Anything else?
Ještě by mě zajímalo, jak jste teď měli diskuzi o tom, že Rusko bude poslední zemí, která bude poražena. Co jste tím závěrem chtěli říct? Je nám to k něčemu?
When you were discussing about Russia being the last country to defeat, what did you try to say by that? What can we take from it?
I don't need to translate to English anymore. Do
No,
I? Repeat the
I think you don't have to. I hope I'm doing it correctly.
Okay. So the point of that study was, if it's correct, the end of the Ukraine war would mark Daniel 12. There's a few caveats, though. We have to wait and see how it plays out. For example, if Russia just wins the war, declares victory, and goes home happy, then that's not correct. Because it has to be the complete and final death of Putin or the King of the South.
No mě by zajímalo, jak jste tam dosadili to Rusko, jako tam je na té první linii pohanského Říma je jako poslední poražen Egypt, ale Egypt symbolicky znamená svět. Jak jste došli k závěru, že to musí být Rusko?
How did you get Russia there? Because Egypt means world. How did you get Russia there?
So symbols can have more than one meaning. So Egypt in verse 43 of Daniel 11 means the world. But I'm saying Egypt here means Russia. And that's
Means King
because-
of the South, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's because these three territories are all King of the South.
That's because what is all King of the South?
So Syria, the Pleasant Land, and Egypt are all territories of the King of the South in this history. So this would be the King of the South, Russia.
Sýrie a krásná zem jsou teritoria krále Jihu.
Syria and the glorious land are the territories of the King of the South.
Syria was. I've got a feeling Elder Parminder said that this way, Mark, he just calls it collateral damage. It's not part of the story. I've got a feeling actually that one isn't King of the South.
But if the first one is and the last one is, then it fits with our line.
Oh, you're right there. There's another one. Well, this is not the king of the south.
Yes, just like in the top one, just like you said now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it makes sense actually. Okay. My takeaway from today is this one that I think you, Monica, mentioned. The win for democracy is the death of the king of the south. So how can the death of Navalny, a loss for democracy, be the death of the king of the south? Okay, any last thoughts?
I think możesz.
Já tuto myšlenku nechápu.
I don't understand this last thought.
Don't understand which bit, the whole lot?
No, this thought that this last one that you said that what you take from today.
So this was Monica's observation. I think Elder Terry teaches the death of Navalny was bad for Putin. And I don't know if Elder Terry says this or somebody else. But I've heard it's because the death of Navalny was the last hope for democracy. Does anyone know? Is that actually what Elder Terry says, or is that a suggestion from someone?
Yes, I think that's what she says. That the defeat of King of the South internal is the death of Navalny.
Yes, but does she say it's because he was the last hope for democracy?
I don't know. I'm not sure if she says it like that.
But for those that do say that, because I've heard that answer, a loss for democracy is actually a win for Putin, not a death. Monica saw you could say prove that using the old model. Here is because of the win for democracy. So it doesn't make sense to say a loss of democracy is a win for Putin.
But if you remember the discussion we had maybe an hour ago, where I was saying that to compare King of the North and King of the South, that for both of them, democracy is a threat. Both for King of the North and King of the South, democracy is a threat.
So you'd have to find a way, because the two conclusions are different.
Yes.
And the biggest problem my brain is having is who is the king of the North? Because democracy is good for the glorious man, But if you think of the King of the North as a baddie, then the King of the North doesn't rule democracy. Okay. Anything else?
Not at the moment,
Okay.
but it really started thoughts in my mind that I want to discover more. So I'm very thankful for today's discussion.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, shall I close in prayer? Almighty God in heaven, we thank you again for good friends and good fellowship and investigating these things and how it opens our minds and our understanding. We pray you'll be with us even unto the end. In Jesus' name, amen.